I did not have an identity. I was labeled the athlete from a very young age and just rode with it. Wow, those are the heartbreaking words of the late Australian skier Brittany George. Her quote was highlighted in a recent study on athletic retirement, and honestly, it just perfectly captures the immense, very real emotional stakes we're looking at today. Because for a lot of these competitors, walking away from their sport isn't just a career change, It's a complete and total loss of self.
Welcome to today's Explainer, the push and the pull, the reality of athletic retirement. Today we're unpacking the hidden physical and emotional battles athletes face when they finally step away from the game. So let's dive right into this. What actually happens when the cheering stops and the real world begins? It's a question we, as fans, almost never ask ourselves, right? I mean, we celebrate the final match, we watch the farewell tour, we see the tearful goodbye waves, but what about the morning after and the years after that? Today we are looking directly into that psychological void. Section 1. The hidden cost of retiring, the psychological void.
I want you to imagine your entire identity, what you do, who your friends are, what your physical body is trained for, and how the entire world sees you, just being completely stripped away overnight. The research defines this extreme vulnerability as athletic identity. Basically, it's the degree to which an individual identifies with their athletic role, and it's often at the absolute expense of every other domain in their life. When an athlete dedicates themselves exclusively to a sport, they kind of fail to build out alternative life paths, and the data actually notes that men in particular often have a higher athletic identity. This intense, exclusive focus heavily predicts severe psychological distress when the career suddenly ends, and all those structured support networks just vanish into thin air.
Section 2. Who is most at risk? The data of distress. To figure out exactly who is struggling the most, we're pulling directly from a major Frontiers in Psychology study that surveyed 173 former athletes, and the researchers found some incredibly surprising risk factors. First up, a higher BMI predicts sleep apnea and compromised overall well-being. Second, and actually this one might seem a bit counterintuitive, younger age actually predicts anxiety. But when you really think about it, it makes sense, right? A younger athlete who is forced to retire has suddenly lost their only life plan. They have to figure out an entirely new career path much earlier than they ever expected. And finally, those who placed a lower priority on sport during their career actually faced a greater risk of sleep-disordered breathing. This is likely because placing a lower priority on the sport might correlate with just a lower priority on overall physical activity and healthy eating in the long run.
Now, this demographic divide becomes glaringly obvious when we look at the prevalence rates of retired athletes at risk, broken down by gender. While men might traditionally hold a higher athletic identity on paper, the reality of post-retirement distress paints a slightly different picture.
Okay, so the absolutely crucial point here is this number, 2.28. The study found that retired women face 2.28 times greater odds of presenting anxiety symptoms compared to men. Just let that sink in for a second. More than double the risk. Despite any assumptions we might have about who struggles the most when the stadium lights go down, the hard data shows that female former athletes are at a significantly higher risk for anxiety.
Section 3. The myth of time. Does it heal all wounds? We all naturally kind of assume that the longer an athlete is retired, the easier it gets to adapt to regular life, right? Well, look at this finding. Recency of retirement showed no association with mental health or sleep outcome measures. That is a massive finding. The researchers looked at athletes within a 20-year window of retirement. Whether an athlete hung up their boots 1 year ago or 15 years ago, the risk factors and the daily struggles remained heavily persistent. Time, it turns out, does not automatically heal the psychological wounds of leaving the sport.
So let me ask you this. If leaving the game is really this hard, if this void is that deep, and the anxiety and sleep issues just stubbornly persist for decades, why stay away at all? Honestly, with all these immense struggles to adapt to normal civilian life, it's really no wonder that some legendary athletes simply decide not to.
Section 4. When retirement doesn't stick, the irresistible pull.
Sometimes the absolute best cure for the distress of retirement is to just lace the boots right back up. Let's look at this timeline of some of the most famous unretirements in football. Paul Scholes? He was gone for less than a year before returning to Manchester United. Goalkeeper Carlos Roa was out for exactly a year before going back to Mallorca. But look at Mark Overmars, a massive 1,545-day gap. He had been retired for over 4 years, but after playing in a one-off testimonial match, he wound back the clock, showed off that trademark pace, and out of nowhere decided to unretire and signed with Go Ahead Eagles over in the Netherlands.
And the reasons for these returns are just as wild as the timelines themselves. Check out this brilliant comparison. On side A, we've got Roger Milla.
He had fully retired and moved to a literal island in the Indian Ocean, but the actual president of Cameroon called him up and begged him to return for the 1990 World Cup, where he casually ended up becoming one of the breakout stars of the whole tournament. Then, on side B, we have Carlos Roa. He retired at the absolute peak of his powers because he genuinely believed the world was going to end with the Y2K apocalypse. So, when the year 2000 rolled around and, well, the world was still here, he just went back to his club. You literally can't make this stuff up.
Now, other notable unretirements point to a much simpler, deeper emotional need. Paul Scholes, for example, was actually working as an assistant manager for the reserves, but the lack of fulfillment and a non-playing routine just pulled him right back in. He simply missed playing too much. Arjen Robben retired at 35 after reaching the absolute pinnacle of a sport with Bayern Munich, but he reversed his decision a year later to make a deeply sentimental return to his boyhood club, FC Groningen, at age 36. For guys like this, that emotional connection to the game is just way too strong to ever fully sever.
Section 5. Winning the second act, the post-game playbook.
But what about the thousands of athletes who can't just call up their old manager and ask for their jersey back? To actually help them thrive in their second act, the researchers laid out a very clear roadmap. Step 1. Educate athletes on healthy physical activity and nutrition, so they don't lose those core habits when the mandatory team training stops. Step 2. Develop goal-setting strategies that are totally outside of sport, which gives them a brand new identity and a sense of purpose. Step 3. Implement dedicated sleep interventions, because as we saw earlier, sleep disorders are incredibly prevalent. And finally, Step 4. Maintain community and social connectivity. Basically, sports science professionals need to start prioritizing this transition support just as much as they prioritize peak career performance.
All of this leaves us with one final, really important question. How should we treat athletes once they can no longer perform for our entertainment? Because when that final whistle blows, their toughest battle is often just beginning. The data clearly shows us the void is real, and the timeline for that suffering doesn't just expire on its own. It's definitely time we start rethinking the human side of sports, ensuring that those who literally give everything for our entertainment have a safe place to land when the cheering finally stops. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.